On this week's episode, listen in to a special conversation between Leverage's very own Nick Sonnenberg, Tanya Fraser, and Florence Bout, as they discuss 5 key lessons learned from the past year.
Today's podcast and webinar is going to be a unique one because we are on a team retreat in the Hamptons, and we figured why not do a 7-month retrospective on the state of the company, all the changes that we've been through the last 7 months. Obviously, a big one was buying out my ex-business partner. And we haven't really commented on all the changes and improvements we've made and how we handled a complex situation. So since we're all together, I thought that it would be an interesting conversation to have live. So
And to accept questions about it as well. So feel free to ask questions and we'll answer as we go along.
So obviously, for those that don't know, October, I think 3rd or 4th, my ex-business partner told me he was leaving and, had 5 minutes basically to prepare. And the issue with it was the way that we had previously separated roles and responsibilities. I was the behind-the-scenes person with operations, with tech, really driving a lot of the changes of how we operate. And a lot of people more so knew him because he was more the face person. So was more in charge of marketing and running the team. So a big issue that we faced immediately was some people didn't even know who I was. So we had to first solve that problem. But then going forward, we obviously uncovered a lot of issues with how things were run. And the purpose of today's talk is to discuss some of those issues, about not just the issues, how we solved it, and the thinking process that went along with solving some, I would say, core issues that we didn't even realize we had. So what are your thoughts on the last 7 months, Tanya?
It's been a ride, that's for sure. It's been like a crazy, fun, stressful, exciting adventure. And I think as a team, we have not only learned a lot, but we have bonded even more, and I think we're more like a family now more than anything. Yeah.
I think that there's always a positive, even in a negative. And while you're in something tough, you can easily just get wrapped up in the negativity of it. And I think one of the things that was important during all this was always keeping in the back of your mind, what's positive from this experience. So on a positive note, it forced us to restructure how we operated, to reevaluate, do we have the right people on the team? And really, it forced us to fix a number of core issues that were just kind of masked because we were growing so fast. We didn't stop and realize that there were some fundamental issues with how we operated. Like we had people on the team with that from previous hiring decisions, like that had like records, and it's just simple Google searches with some of these people, like they were in like legal battle for leaving companies under bad circumstances, or had literally records, and being handed off into that role then without knowing that there were these underlying problems, not to mention all the problems with we didn't have that much processes documented. People didn't know who I was. There was a lot of just things all at once that came together that kind of forced us to regroup very quickly and reevaluate how we operate. But Florence, what's your impression of the last 7 months?
Yeah, exactly the same. We were very much in startup mode before. I think you said it really well at dinner last night, where you were saying before it was we almost grew too quickly, and there weren't processes and structure underneath to support all of that. And we've spent so much time really standardizing everything and consolidating the group and having the same ethos among all the team members that it's really excited to move that, to grow from that, to move out of the startup phase and to just really become a company in the best sense of the word.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we kind of grew up from this, and premature scaling is a big issue. And I would say that Leverage definitely fell into that trap. Like it sounds sexy to say you have a 150 person team or you're growing 5 to 10% every month. But in our case, it ended up hurting us because it masked core issues like, how do we hire? Are we actually executing tasks to the standards that we want to be? And, when you kind of lifted up the rug, we kind of found all these issues that were just masked by the fact that we were having rapid growth. So, I think that this was I think that having something this extreme happen was necessary for us to get to where we needed to be.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there was so many areas, like just even in my role and supporting of the team, we really had to ask the question, who are we now? And in what direction do we want to go? And this last 7-month journey has I think we've really found who we are now, and the team is stronger for it.
So lessons learned during this process. One, you need to have a vision for the company and establish that vision with the key stakeholders up front. That was a mistake, definitely, that was made by me, because ultimately, if you don't have the same vision as someone else, you're going to run into issues at some point. So, and also for the rest of the team, it's important for everyone to be on the same page culturally and know what the vision of the company is, right? Like, how can you expect people to rally around you and really give all of their time and attention to something that they don't even really understand what they're doing it for? So that was a big thing that we did right away, was establish core values, company vision, roles and responsibilities. I mean, we were a 150 person company with no roles and responsibilities. It was really, we were trying to just hope that people would self-organize. And for being an efficiency company, looking back at it, we were so inefficient. No?
It was amazing. We got as far as we did.
Yeah, like no one was accountable for things. There was no concept of transparency or accountability. It was really just like a free-for-all.
Yeah, no metrics. So exactly, just building on to what you just said, the first thing you did was create an org chart and make people responsible for different. That's when I became head of operations, for example. So I got to own my department, and then giving us the metrics and to hold us accountable to that. Let's start measuring, and how are we tracking? Okay, that metric's not as good as I want it to be. What can I do about it? Let's go change, and then let's have a group discussion and figure out how we're going to make that metric better.
And I'm all about like non-hierarchical types of organizations, and we've always been decentralized. We've been remote from the beginning, which has served as a challenge, but it forces you to operate efficiently if you have that constraint. But then I've never wanted to be the type of person to micromanage. And so putting an org chart together was a little bit uncomfortable because there is the risk that you all of a sudden have this hierarchy that I didn't really want. But I think that we found this nice hybrid where there is a little bit of hierarchy, but for the most part, people are accountable for themselves. They don't feel like they're getting micromanaged. And I think we found like a very good balance of staying organized and having minimal hierarchy, but still letting people not feel micromanaged, having transparency and accountability.
It empowers the team too. I mean, no matter what, you still need to know who you are, where you're going, and what you want to achieve. And having just that little bit of structure, I think we've grown leaps and bounds because of that.
And who to go to. I think that was one of the key things, is then people were being inefficient, as you were saying, because they didn't know who to go to. So they'd ask the same question to 3 different people. And now the roles and responsibilities mean, okay, I have a finance question, I go to Casey, rather than going to maybe Tanya, me, and then we redirect to Casey. So it's helped us work as a unit better.
And this is something like it's almost exactly a year ago, actually, when I pushed for the company to start taking process documentation seriously. And it was kind of a new concept, and other people at first didn't see why it was so valuable. And Process Street, we started using that tool, I think, in May or June, and it took some time for people to understand exactly why it was so important. But can you imagine not of having things documented and then having someone like a co-founder like leave without things? Like, I don't want to toot my own horn, but thank God like we did have those things documented, because it would have been, as hard as it would have been 10 times harder without things documented.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time, of course, improving that and fine-tuning everything and documenting even more. I mean, that was my Q1 goal, was to get 80%, something 8 to 10 processes per department documented. So that was my core goal. But it's just setting us in a really good position to improve even more, because it's all so transparent, and to bring in other team members and scale if needed.
Yeah, and we never had that concept of not just the core values and stuff, but we never had quarterly goals. And you can't have a quarterly goal if you don't have roles and responsibilities, because how do you know who should be responsible for what goal in the first place? So what we did was kind of build like our own hybrid type of self-management system. So taking like bits from a book called Traction, which has this concept of goal setting with rocks, and creating, they had some tools that we use, like People Analyzer, which was, I looked back at it actually last week. And out of like, I think 8 people that I ran through the People Analyzer, there was 3 people that according to like the exercise should not be on the team, and already 2 out of the 3 are no longer on the team. And there's one more that was kind of on the fence, and that person's still around, but you know, odds are that that person probably won't be by the end of the year. And I think that the tool was a really accurate tool that we should have used way before. But back to my original point, taking elements from Traction, 12-week year, and even Tony Robbins' RPM method and Scrum methodology for software development, we really developed our own unique way of self-managing, self-organizing, and having transparency and accountability without feeling that you're getting micromanaged, which that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of implementing, because I know now that even if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, God forbid, like the company would still be able to survive, because we've developed our own system and process for self-management. Because now it's gotten so good, like when we do our one-on-ones every week, which is another new thing. We never had set meetings. It was just kind of, oh, hey, there's a fire to put out, let's talk. Like now we actually have meetings with agendas, with a structure.
And not endless, like, you know, there's this word meeting, and that could be so overused and in the wrong context about too many people, too many meetings, but really figuring out how long should a meeting be, what is the most productive time for it to be, and who are the productive team members that need to be there, as in team members that can't the meeting there, that back as much as possible to Ben. So, but yeah, we have those meetings now.
And the meetings follow a certain process and again, that's taken from Traction, but we have like a 5-minute segue in the beginning. Then we go into a scorecard where we've defined key metrics that each person owns, and we go over whether in the previous week it was good or bad according to this scorecard. Rock review, where we're just saying we're on track to achieve the quarterly goal or not. And then what else do we do? And then we go into the core of it, which is the identify, discuss, and solve. And then there's a conclusion with a rating. And it takes some time to build like a good structure and cadence. But now our meetings are really efficient, I would say. And our one-on-one meetings are even more like, they used to be an hour, and now like I think we're doing them in 10 minutes, because before the call, since it's not micromanagement, it's really just a discussion more so. People are organizing in Trello according to the system that we built, what their priorities should be. Every task has 3 elements according to our way of doing it. So every task has a person, a point, which is where we've stolen this from Scrum, where they put how many hours they anticipate a particular task taking. And then there's a label, and those labels correspond to a quarterly goal that we established in our quarterly meetings. So there's always 3 elements to a task. And what we do is there's a backlog list that we add cards to each other's backlog list during the week. But then it's up to the individual on the one-on-one to prioritize and move cards from backlog to doing. And they move those cards over until the total points adds up to 40 hours, which is what we've defined as full capacity for the team. And then what else is unique is we created a list called Repeat Weekly, because everyone, no matter who you are in the company, has stuff on a repeating basis that you have to account for. So meetings, or responding to Slack, or responding to email, like all these things take time. There might be specific ones for you in a particular role, but that was a super important exercise, because in order to know how much you can do in a week, you have to take the sum of your repeat stuff plus all the stuff that you move from backlog to doing. So implementing that structure, I think, fundamentally changed everything about how we operate. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it also empowers the team, because it really gives them control over what they're doing each week, and they're deciding sort of the direction. But as a team, we're overseeing it all and working together.
And it's made us also think, and obviously I like this because I'm a data scientist by trade, but we've become data oriented rather than in the past. There was no data to support making decisions. So there was no way to make sure that something that we actually works successfully or not. So now everything is very data driven. We can see very clearly when we make a change, if there was a measurable impact or not. So now we're not having flat conversations like we used to always, and not be able to understand why cancellation rate used to fluctuate within like a 5% plus or minus. Now, because of how quantitative we've gotten, not only is our cancellation rate better than it ever was before, but it's also now consistent, and we've removed all the variance that we used to have. So we're getting a few questions. So one from John: good for you guys being so transparent about this. We have all been there, power on. Thanks, John. Yeah, it was a tough 7 months, but I'm so thankful for going through it. I honestly feel like I learned more about myself in 7 months than I would have in 7 years being an entrepreneur. And everyone calls himself an entrepreneur, but really, what is an entrepreneur? If you have everything easy and never are faced with challenge, how can you really call yourself an entrepreneur if you haven't been tested properly? So this, I feel like I finally earned entrepreneurs, because it was just too easy before. Like there was always just new clients coming in. There was no test. It's not, you're all of a sudden you can't make payroll and you have to figure out what to do and reorganize very quickly, or cancellations are spiking to crazy levels and people are quitting left and right because there's rumors being spread that are false, and then they leave you halfway through projects and you have to give $30K in refunds to clients. Until you're really tested with something that extreme, you can call yourself whatever you want, but in my eyes, you're not an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it really showed, I think, the team like what we're made of, and we're even stronger because of it. It's so easy to just roll into a ball, collapse, and say, this is too hard. Why is this happening to us? But as a team, we really banded together and was like, all right,
totally,
bring it on. We'll do it.
And I think what society has deemed to be like the metrics of success in a company kind of led us also down a wrong path. I think people think it's so cool to say you're a 150 person team, but in our case, getting to that size, when you have to overhire to solve problems, you're kind of just throwing, what's that phrase? But you're not solving core issues, right? You're just putting band-aids on things, right? What we've found is now that we're half the size and we're in the 70s, we've gotten our churn rate, our client cancellation rate, down to the lowest levels ever, as well as improving team culture, decreasing the cost of monthly recurring software, decreasing all the management overhead, because when you have 80 people who aren't good fits, you have to waste a lot of internal time managing the excess. And we really tried taking a step back and how can we get more done with less? Like, how can we be smarter, work smarter, not harder, and throw money at a problem, but try to fix the core problems, right? So for me, for me, decreasing the size of the team, even though to the outside a big team sounds cool in a lot of cases, to me the cooler thing is revenue per head count. So, take the total revenue and divide it by head count. That should be like the metric of cool. If we can do $1 billion of revenue with 3 people, like that would be impressive.
You would have automated a lot.
Yeah. When's the new dashboard coming? So great question, Daniel. Actually, next week, we're getting the first batch of clients on the new dashboard. It's been a long time coming, but with all of the restructuring and increase of costs that we had to go through in the last 7 months that we weren't expecting, we took a step back and slowed down the development of the dashboard. But that's coming out in June for a small group of people. The next 12 months, I have a book coming out, which is all about basically the system that I've created for when I do business consulting, but also the thought process that has been developed over especially the last 7 months, seeing how is the right way to run a company. So it's going to be much more practical, like a handbook, versus people overall liked idea to execution in terms of the reviews. The only negative reviews that we got for that book was, okay, well, you were able to do it. That's great. But I don't see how I can actually implement any of these things. So it's going to, in the next 12 months, there'll be a book that comes out, which will be much more of like a how-to, so that people that can't afford the consulting can still get a lot of value out of reading the book and implementing some of the stuff for themselves. The rest of the vision, I don't like thinking 3 to 5 years out. I think like maybe once a year, it's good to just reflect and think about that stuff. But we're really hyper focused on the quarterly sprints right now. So like right now, some of the big things that we're doing in this quarter, we've been 1099 forever. So we're getting our first W-2 employee finally, which we're really hoping that will solve some of the speed issues, because then you can hold people accountable to work certain hours. So we're in the next quarter, we're releasing the dashboard, moving people to W-2s. We're rethinking this concept of an account manager. And what this should do is, it's a new workflow, so it'll decrease the number of hops a client has to have within Leverage. So right now, one of the issues is the person that onboards is a different person that re-engages, who's a different person than does coaching calls, and that's a different person that does the tasks. So we're consolidating some of those roles, so you are interacting with fewer people and repeating yourself less. What other big projects do we have?
We were talking about maybe doing like client retreats with the team.
Oh, yeah. So we just did a team plus client, I guess you would call it, workshop on business efficiency and productivity. And it was a beta test, but we learned a lot from that, and kind of gave people an inside peek to how I think about productivity and how the rest of us think about it, but more so extending the concept of productivity to a business environment. So, there's a lot of talk on productivity, but when you just because people are productive doesn't mean that the company will operate productively. And I gave the example of the 2004 men's Olympic basketball, even the bench worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's because, and I've seen this a lot, individual productivity is necessary but not sufficient for an organization to operate properly. You could have 100 people on your team all moving faster but all in opposite directions. So I think you need to have everyone on the same page with what the concept of productivity is. But as we've seen, it's much more complex making an organization be efficient versus an individual being productive. So from the feedback that we got from the workshop, a lot of people really liked how we've designed those weekly sprints. So yeah, I definitely think the next 12 months we'll do a proper workshop. We'll charge money for it, and we'll organize it based on all the feedback we've had, showing people how leverage operates, and not just telling people the tools, but showing them how to think about the tools, because tools can change. You really need to understand the underlying conceptual reasons when and why you would use a project management software versus a process documentation software versus a communication tool, right? And that's the key, because all these tools can change. If you don't know deep down when and why to use them, you'll never operate efficiently. But then also show you how to configure them, because again, you might know when and why to use these tools, but if they're not set up properly, they can be distractors, not productivity enhancers.
I think one thing that the mastermind this past weekend, many people liked, we also did hands-on breakouts. So we got people to inbox zero and Slack zero right there and then, got past all of their anxieties, and we just went and did it. Yeah.
So other things, so in the next 12 months, like dashboard should be totally rolled out. So we should internally decrease a lot of our monthly software bills, because we've built our own software that we should be using. So coming off of that, and in terms of operationally, in the next 12 months, we should roll out this concept of an account manager across the whole organization. We do have ideas for how to pay people differently on the team. So pay potentially based on completion of a task versus paying on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. So we'll see about that towards the end of the year. What are some other, the book is a big one. What are some other things coming out?
Well, you had some crazy ideas about like
natural language processing and machine learning. Yeah.
And like the donation payment.
Oh yeah, we'll see about that. That's kind of complicated, but I'll mention that on a future date. I don't want to disclose too much here of our secrets, but I think some other obvious things to implement in the next year is natural language processing to identify potential unhappy clients before they complain based on patterns in their language. At the size we are, it would be really inefficient to be checking every task. There's just too many. So you need to have some tricks to point you in the direction of where you need to be looking. Also developing some machine learning and some optimization around who picks up tasks, right? Because not everyone has the same skill set and skill level. So at any point in time, how do you make sure that the right person is picking up the right task? So that's an interesting research and development project that we have in the pipeline. What else do we have?
I think that's it, but I think the dashboard is such a huge one, because we'll be tracking so many more metrics, and being able to just customize so much of what we're talking.
Well, another thing also that ties into the dashboard is we've never had a proper CRM. So we're setting up Salesforce right now, and that's going to tie into the dashboard. So we'll be able to have like a very robust client dossier by connecting through Salesforce's API into our dashboard. So then everyone in the company will have all the clients' information from where it belongs, which is in a CRM. So that's kind of the next year. 3 to 5 years, I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll be sold by then. Does anyone else have any questions about leverage? No?
Gotta wait for the typing.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you want to share about operations right now?
No, I think you just started with the big Salesforce one, so that's going to be very exciting for us, and when that's up and running, and the whole integration, and from a client success point of view as well, and the amount of follow-ups we do, and the amount of information we have that can facilitate the experience with you. So that when we start kind of delving into that, that's going to.
Yeah. Well, also another big change that we're making is we're working out an equity structure for the whole company, so that everyone has some piece of the company, and we want the team to get a bit smaller, not too much, but maybe stay around the same size, but make sure that everyone that's on the team is really a part of it. And that was a big problem before, was we didn't have people feel like they had ownership. How does Salesforce work better than Intercom? So that's a good question. So Intercom does have some CRM-like features, but it isn't considered like a proper CRM. So in Salesforce, you can do just way more robust things in terms of following up with leads and managing your leads.
Automated sequences.
Automated sequence. Well, you can do some automated sequences with Intercom, but it's just not the same, not as robust nearly. And we've kind of with all tools, like start simple until you kind of hit a breaking point. But you also have to be mindful of switching costs. So Salesforce, for one, you can build out a way more robust profile on people, which is important for our unique case because we're doing tasks for people. So being able to quickly pull client preferences, so that's at the fingertips of people executing the tasks, is really critical. And Salesforce by far is way better for that. They're the market standard for CRM, so they have the most third-party integrations and apps that connect to it. And since we're so ingrained in automation, there's so many more opportunities for automating follow-up and closing leads with Salesforce. And then what actually is surprising is that we've gotten to the size we are without a proper CRM. We grew, I think, so fast to such a scale that we didn't really care that we weren't properly managing leads. Mm-hmm. So, this Salesforce is going to be much better for us keeping track of where people are in a sales pipeline and a sales cycle, and making sure that we're doing all the proper follow-up. Well, another thing that we're figuring out too, which is a problem with Intercom, is they have Intercom Educate, which is like an FAQ for external people, but we've been using it for internal wiki purposes, and it's not meant for that. So we've been experimenting with knowledge-based tools. We're looking at Guru and Ask Spoke right now. We'll probably make a decision in the next couple of days. But what's cool with these, and what always was an issue with having one of these external fancy wikis, is people don't go there and use it. So with Guru or Ask Spoke, in either case, Ask Spoke, they both have their pros and cons, but what they both have is they have Slack bots. So instead of making people go to another tool or system, which is always friction, people can ask Slack bot questions, and through natural language processing and machine learning, automatically answer on your behalf. So that is a massive time saving, so that you're not having to repeat answers to things. And it can create support tickets through Ask Spoke. So if the bot can't find the answer, it'll create a ticket, and then a manager can answer, and that gets added to the knowledge base. So that's the next kind of big kind of piece of software. Like I would say Process Street from last year that I implemented was kind of a new paradigm of type of software that we were using, and now this is the next big thing, is Wiki, because that's clearly a different use case. For knowledge documentation is different than process documentation, right? And there's a subtle difference, but what I would say is a knowledge documentation is, what's the Wi-Fi password? That's not a process. You're just giving information. Or when is payroll? So that's super important, and we haven't really properly done that till now. We were really focused on process and payroll, or documenting all the steps of hiring, right? So we've done a good job at that. Now the next step is let's document all the knowledge. Any other final comments or feedback?
No, more questions. Let us know if you have more questions. But we can do another demo on Ask Spoke later. Like once we've got it all set up, we'll do a demo and show you guys what it's all about, because it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think so in my role, head of tasks, I look after the team and the people, and leverage. Yeah, it's great that we're talking about all of this data and technology. We do still recognize that we are people first, and building relationships with our clients and our team members. So we're also really focusing on getting team members on board that are true experts in what we are talking about, and making sure that our task quality is the absolute best out of any service out there. So our focus is still creating amazing work for all of our clients.
Yeah. Well, and also that follows what's written in the Agile Manifesto. If you've ever read the Agile Manifesto, they say people before process. And I think in the past we were process before people, but we've really changed our thinking lately, and we've made it way harder to become a member on the team. You know, like it was too loosey goosey before. Now it really should be an honor to work with us, not to blow smoke up our asses, but I mean, it's a really unique environment, and people, you know, if people should really feel kind of honored to be a part of like our little family that we've created. It's apart from you know, learning a lot of new skills and the flexibility. I mean, a lot of people have just become close friends. You know, like everyone here in the Hamptons, like it's almost we've developed this culture where it's very serious professional, but everyone also has this element of being a friend. And I think that we've started respecting that culture more, and we've made it much tighter in terms of, you know, joining the team.
Want to take your startup or business to the next level? Get our free cheat sheet with the main takeaways from this week's Leverage Podcast episode. Visit podcast.getleverage.com. Thanks for listening to the Leverage Podcast. Leverage is a premier outsourcing platform that gives you access to a team of skilled professionals who can complete any task or project for life and business. Our goal is to help people be their most efficient and productive selves. Focus on your unique ability. Let us do the rest. Get Leverage.